Alright guys, welcome back to the Celestial Invitational. I'm D2, with me is Monk. We are English casting this for you today. Sorry, and now we're going to see Surrender versus Jiesha after we just witnessed Eloise defeat Fu Oliver 3-2.
Right. Surrender, of course, is one of the best players in Korea, if not regarded as the best player in Korea. He got rank 1 legend a lot of times on the Korean server or in the Asian server. He also he got first place in the OGN Masters Season 2, I believe, and he got second place in the OGN Season 3. And there are only 3 seasons this year, so that's got to be quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, Jiesha, what can you tell me about Jiesha? I don't really know too much about him.
So Jiesha, if you guys don't know, the half of the players are invited, half of them are qualified from China, and Jiesha was a pro qualifier into the qualifier that qualified for him, so he had to qualify twice, as we see Surrender on the screen, part of Coup All Killers. And so Jiesha, he's on Team Celestial, and he actually beat Love CX, the BlizzCon qualifier, in order to get here in the final of that qualifier. So actually, we'll just take a look at Surrender's decks here for a second before we get back to Jiesha. And looks like Surrender's bringing Shaman, Rogue, and Mage. Looks like a Tempo Mage and standard-ish Oil Rogue, and a pretty kind of smorky face mech shaman.
Right, I'm just taking a screenshot right now so we can refer to these decks later on. Pretty aggressive lineup, I'd want to say. We were talking to Firebat yesterday, and he was saying that he always gears his lineups to do one thing, to be really good against one kind of deck. And we can see it with Surrender's lineup. Very, I would say very aggressive-oriented decks and very almost face-oriented decks.
Yeah, definitely. Getting back to Jiesha, he is one of the more unknown players in this group. Just going back to what he's accomplished, he got the top 4 of the 512-man Gold Series Open one time. And in order to get here, you have to get through a qualifier tournament, and he actually qualified for that qualifier tournament twice. So really worked hard to get here, managed to make that happen. And taking a look at these decks, he has Shaman, Warlock, and Paladin. It looks like it's going to be a Zoolock, I think our first of this tournament so far. Another mech face Shaman, and for the Paladin, going to be a Secret Paladin.
Yeah, really strange choice. The one card that actually sticks out to me from Jiesha's lineup is the Leper Gnome in the Zoo deck. Typically not something that we see because Zoo is not really a face-oriented deck. It's more of a board control-oriented deck. And Leper Gnome, yes, it's a good turn 1 play, but after that, I don't think it's really that great.
Yeah, I mean, his deck is a bit more aggressive than what you typically see. Obviously, he has that Sea Giant, so that can go towards a later game as well. But nothing like Morganis, no Dr. Boom or something like that. So he kind of wants to finish these games out early, I believe. And being able to get that 1 drop on turn 1 is really important, just increasing his chances by that much, having that Leper Gnome in his deck.
His Mech Shaman is also really weird. I'm not sure if you caught it, but it doesn't have Tunnel Trog in it at all. Instead, it has 2 of the Ancestral Knowledge. So you have like this really, like, I want to say clunky Overload card, but you don't have the card that benefits from Overload, which is the card that everyone's been hyping up recently.
Right. We'll see if he can kind of survive without the Eternal Trog, which helps out so much. The Ancestral Knowledge is something that Luffy put in his deck, but I believe Reina did not. Those 2 being the most popular aggressive Shaman decks right now. So interesting to see that from Jiesha, especially without the Tunnel Trog. We're going to start off with a classic matchup, actually, that being the Oil Rogue versus the Zoo Warlock from Jiesha. And this is a pretty classic matchup. It used to be heavily favored for the Rogue, but with all the Death Rattle minions coming in ever since Next Ramus, kind of crazy to be talking about such a early expansion. But yeah, ever since that changed, it's been a bit more even of a matchup because it's kind of hard for the Rogue to deal with all the big guys. But in this particular case, I think that Surrender will have an easier time than normal against what is the normal Zoolock, considering that Jiesha doesn't have those big guys like the Dr. Boom, like the Morganis.
Right, Dr. Boom especially is such a huge problem for Rogue. that the absence of it actually just makes the rogue matchup so much better. Right now, if Surrender is able to stabilize early on and get a board lead, then there's no like huge threats that Jiesha can come back with later in the game. He has to rely on flooding the board, even though there's like not really that many flood cards in his deck. Like there's no Relinquary Seeker in this deck.
Yeah, no Reliquary Seeker in the deck. Though that all that does really is make a 5/5 at the end. And it's pretty hard to rely on that. I think usually you only take that off the Dark Peddler when you don't have anything else good to take. So you kind of go like, well, I guess I'm going to go for that this game. So Cinder has an interesting option here. He can take care of this Void Walker, but it's only 1 damage per turn. And typically you want to save that backstab for something more dangerous, like a maybe this Direwolf Alpha, or maybe like a Knife Juggler later. So I kind of like this decision by Surrender, being patient, not worried about that 1 damage per turn.
Right. Also, if he saves this backstab, he also has the option if he top decks into SI Agent to activate it later on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge to be able to activate those combos. So it looks like we have a Tournament Attendee, Mortal Coil, or Soulfire. All reasonable options here. Tournament Attendee just getting another guy on the board that Surrender has to deal with, and he can't, use his weapon on everything. So, pretty tough decision. The Mortal Coil can, finish off something. It can be pretty useful. Not enough space for it usually in a Zoo deck, but still a good utility card. But looks like he's going for the damage, realizing that he has to finish this game off soon if he's gonna be able to win it.
Yeah, really, the Mortal Coil isn't that amazing against Rogue. It doesn't really have a lot of 1/1 minions besides the Violet Teacher tokens. And Soulfire is exactly what you need to finish your opponent off. Although, I suspect sometime in the future we'll see something like the old school problem where he has both Doomguard and the Soulfire in his hand, and he has to get rid of one or the other.
Yeah, that is quite the problem that thankfully Zoo players don't have to deal with too much anymore because of that, Void Caller helping out. And Surrender with kind of an interesting decision here. Obviously, you can't use that prep like an Innervate. You can't get out that Ezra Drake early. But, yeah, pretty tough in general. And nothing to do. Really wanted to top deck a 3-drop there. Unfortunately, doesn't get it. And, yeah, just going to pass here. Doesn't... I mean, he could have maybe done 1 damage to that Void Walker. I mean, with no backstabs left, what do you think the reason is behind not even touching that? Maybe just don't take the damage?
Yeah, I guess every point of damage matters. He also has to think about how eventually he's gonna kill this Void Walker. This Void Walker. And I guess he's thinking that his Pilot Shredder will somehow interact with it, and the 1 health doesn't really matter too much.
Mm-hmm. In case you guys are just arriving to this broadcast, these players have to use all 9 decks, all 9 classes, excuse me, as they play this round robin. So every player today is going to be playing 3 matches today. Full round robin, the matches are already decided. So, Eloise isn't going to play the winner of this. She's going to play Surrender next, for those of you wondering. And that's also why you see 2 shamans on the screen. They have to play all 9 decks today.
Right, and this might get slightly out of control here with the implosion that we know is coming up. Even though, you know what? Surrender has a really good turn next turn with Azure Drake Prep Fan of Knives that will clear off most of the board. And like you said, if he goes for that play, and the Nerubian Egg doesn't get played, you're right that 1 damage to the Void Walker would actually matter. What essentially would happen is that Surrender would just hit the Void Walker yet again.
Ooh.
And he goes for something different.
Yeah, interesting. Doesn't want to commit too much to the board, but in this case, he's actually making himself more vulnerable to AoE, kind of paradoxically.
Oh, so much more vulnerable to AoE, actually.
Maybe he's looking to play this Nerubian Egg, though. That could be the case. Yeah, I think what he wanted to do, he wanted to guarantee that his board not be too vulnerable. So he wanted to make sure he got this Nerubian Egg out, which means that he didn't obviously have the mana for that implosion. So in the end, it worked out pretty well for him. We could see, yeah, I mean, I think you go for it anyway, right? Just leave the Nerubian on the field.
Yeah, you're actually not that scared of just a lowly 4/4 on the board. You can deal with it in a variety of ways. Like if the Zoo only has a 4/4 and you have a 4/4 on the field at turn 5, I would say that's like probably slightly above average when you're Rogue facing off against Zoo. Not only that, but you have way more resource sources than your opponent, especially because even though you're gonna clear the board mostly this turn, you're also gonna draw two additional cards.
Yeah, and something like this Direwolf Alpha could be a slight tell to surrender. Sometimes that card is cut in favor of bigger cards, like, the Morganis, like the Dr. Boom, just more, just powerful cards in general. So seeing this, maybe he feels like if he can just stabilize, then he'll be in good shape, as I started my way through that sentence. Whereas if he's playing, a deck that, has bigger creatures later on, then, opting to not clear everything all at once could hurt him in the end. If you kind of have to deal with minion after minion after minion, back to back to back.
All right. Jiesha is considering the merits of soul firing here, but also considering whether he wants to tap first. Is the average minion that he'll draw from the tap better than, like, would he play that minion and did he want to discard it? Unfortunately, I think that's one of the cards he doesn't want to discard. I think he would have been happy with the Abusive Sergeant. The Implosion would be pretty useful, especially after you've seen one Phantom Knives. But we know from our perspective that the double Blade Flurry is definitely a real threat.
Yeah, definitely. And you always have to keep those AoEs in mind, especially because Surrender, he's essentially passed his first 3 turns. So definitely something that's on the mind of Jiesha going forward. And
oh my god.
Wow, that is pretty well. It's kind of awkward still. He probably just has to SI7 the face here. But
if you have board control against a Zoo player and you're still at a relatively high health, I think even though you it's kind of like first world problems where you have to SI agent the face as the rogue player, right?
Yeah, in the end though, I mean, if you go for that play, you have Sap, double Blade Flurry in hand, and you really want to be, saving your resources as much as possible. And I was about to suggest this play potentially, just Sap the Nerubian, especially because that might be the biggest thing you see from here on out. So I kind of like this. You're saving your backstab and your Eviscerate for plays down the road, and you can maybe use it on the Nerubian next turn and kind of give yourself more time overall.
Yeah, it's even better with the knowledge that we know that there's no Mal'Ganis, there's no Dr. Boom in this deck. Really, the only better card to sap, I think, would be the Sea Giant, but it's actually just going to be really hard to get a Sea Giant onto the field with the hand that Jiesha currently has.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be pretty difficult to make that happen. And it's also a one-of, so not too likely that he draws it in the first place, especially because he's going to be trying to fight for board control. He might just play out, 1 drop, 3 drop, 2 drop here instead of tapping, because you can't really surrender the board to the rogue really ever because of all the removal they have. You need to just make sure you get as much momentum as possible.
I would say that's yet another pretty good draw here. After you mostly clear the board, do you think it's better to, if you trade into the Haunted Creeper with your 3/3, do you think it's better to heal yourself for 3 or to heal your SI agent for 1?
It's pretty close. In the end, you've seen a Direwolf Alpha, and you haven't seen Abusive Sergeant, I don't believe. So, say you clear. He might go face here. Yeah, it looks like he's gonna go face. I mean, the damage to face is relevant too, so I can see him, not wanting to bother with clearing kind of 2/3 of this Haunted Creeper. It kind of makes sense as well. And yeah, kind of an awkward situation for Jiesha here. Doesn't get to use both Abusive Sergeants really effectively unless he wants to go face. Dark Peddler's not too bad a pickup though.
Oh, yeah, what would you say is the best card you could get off Dark Peddler here?
Well, that Soulfire thing. That Soulfire is pretty good. I mean, Power Overwhelming wouldn't be too helpful because those Abusive Sergeants do the job anyway. And yeah, I think this is really, really good for tempo at the moment. He can play his whole hand out right now. He could go face as well if he really wants to start pushing damage. But yeah, I imagine he's just gonna play everything out and then just Soulfire this 3/3. He will leave himself very vulnerable to board clear, but unless Surrender picks up something else, the initiative could go back to Jiesha.
Right, Jiesha knows that even though he doesn't have cards in his hand, he has a hero power which keeps getting him cards, so he really needs... Oh my god, it's so huge.
That works.
I was just gonna say he needs well, not only an AoE but cards that draw him more cards, and specifically Phantom Knives and Sprint are two of the best draws he could have gotten.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of unfortunate that he can't use that sprint right now. Would like to see a minion and then maybe sprint the next turn. But, I mean, that Phantom Knife is actually pretty big. It doesn't seem like it because of the two Blade Flurries in hand, but those two Blade Flurries represent a lot of damage if he can, you know, pick up Deadly Poison or the Tinkers. And, I mean, those two represent basically the end of the game, especially considering that Jiesha is going to be tapping a lot from that one.
Yeah, I think one thing that Jiesha really needs in the next few turns is because Surrender will probably use his sprints on the next turn, he needs to develop a board strong enough that he can do immense damage over the next 2 turns. Any board that Jiesha can make stick on the next turn will probably deal 2 points of damage, or deal damage for over 2 turns. So like a Doom Guard on the very next turn would be pretty huge.
I was wondering what Surrender was thinking about, and that's obviously the only thing that he could have been thinking about, whether to attack the 2-1 or Enry Dagger or do that Blade Flurry play. What do you think about that decision? I mean, he gets... I guess it's, you know, he takes 2 damage off his face, puts 2 damage on his opponent, which could matter in the end, I suppose. Looks like he really has, you know, kind of read into the fact that Jiesha is playing a more aggressive deck and not, you know, some bigger minions.
Right. So that play, I think, is a play that 90% of like players, especially newer players, wouldn't make. But now that you think about it, it does make quite a bit of sense. Surrender doesn't believe that this game will really last long enough for the second Blade Flurry to make a significant difference.
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
an Azure Drake that
I
he
have
just
no
top
idea.
decked?
He picks it up so
Oh,
quickly.
prep.
So prep, yeah. Doesn't really make sense to prep here. Sometimes you want to just prep first, or sorry, just sprint first if you want to set up for next turn. But so many minions that he could pick up, and it looks like it's paying off for him right here. Gonna immediately use the Deadly Poison to get that 1 onto the field. I don't think he's gonna tag. Doesn't really make too much sense, especially because he could top deck maybe a prep and Tinkers off of that next sprint. Double Owl comes in the hand for Jiesha. Owl is pretty bad in this matchup. You really want to see it against other minions or against other decks. And I imagine we're going to see this Doomguard now that he's picked it up. He's just going to have to get rid of one of these owls.
Yeah, a little unfortunate. He's gonna have to silence the Violet Teacher and then possibly Doomguard into it. Or do you think it's possible for him to go up for a more aggressive approach?
Well, now that he silenced the wrong thing, wrong thing, quote unquote, yeah, he's definitely going to do that. It's just, I mean, Jiesha's looking at Surrender's hand, right? He hasn't done anything in a while, so, you know, likely just going to be the, you know, just the sap in hand. But that's going to be game. Surrender does pick up the Tinkers in order to finish out the game, and well played by him overall.
Yeah, just a really nice play. Overall, I think, like we said in the beginning of this match, I think the Rogue did have quite a bit of advantage simply because of the style of Zoo deck that Jiesha chose to bring to this tournament. I know China is kind of like the place where Zoo really thrives, and the Chinese players really know their Zoo decks. But unfortunately, Jiesha's decision to bring this kind of low curving Zoo deck isn't working out for him.
Yeah, definitely. Well, to be fair, that's one of the worst matchups, right? Rogue really excels at taking out small minions, kind of killing the tempo of the opponent who tries to, you know, burst you down with that kind of big board. Just so many options in its arsenal. And we're going to see a completely different matchup now. Obviously, Jiesha coming back with that Zulok, but Surrender coming up with his aggressive Mech Shaman. We obviously have Mech Shamans in both of these players' arsenals in this series, but what do you think about the one that Surrender bought? Obviously, you took a screenshot of that, so what are some interesting cards in there?
Well, Surrender's deck list is, again, a carbon copy of Reynad's deck list. So it's going to be like 2 Unbound Elementals, 2 Spider Tanks. Pretty standard, 2 ofs of everything. A very low-cost deck if it were not for the Doomhammer, so it might be something that people can try out. I do want to mention that the remainder of Surrender's 2 decks, Tempo Mage and Mech Shaman, they're quite unfavorable against the Zoo deck from Jiesha. I think these 2 decks, the Mech Shaman, the Tempo Mage, and I would say Druid would be 3 of the most unfavorable matchups against Zoo. So even though Jiesha lost the first game in kind of an unfavorable matchup against Rogue, he still has a pretty good chance, and it was pretty smart of him to bring this particular Zoo to this tournament.
Yeah, it definitely can be something that works against all the aggressive decks that people are forced to play in this scenario. Surrender with an interesting choice here. He has so many options. He can go for the Totem Golem and then play the Cogmaster behind that. Looks like he's going to go for the Whirling Zap-O-Matic instead, and he can push a lot of damage. That might be the only way he kind of wins this matchup, right? Because obviously the attrition battle is going to go to the Zoo.
Right, the Zoo just has so many ways to gain board control. The Mech Shaman is kind of like a face deck, while the Zoo deck is kind of like a board control deck, and the board control deck almost always wins. That's why you see Paladin with their Muster for Battles and Shielded Minibots have such an advantage over the Mech Shaman, and it's why you see Zoo have such an advantage over the Mech Shaman as well.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about these plays early. There's a really smart plays by these players. I'm actually getting Artosis TM nerd chills going on right here because they're really good. Surrender played that Whirling Zap-O-Matic knowing that he had two options to deal with whatever came on the board, whether it was that Annoyatron or the Rockbiter in hand, followed by the Cogmaster. And Jiesha, responding to that, knowing that his opponent could have had an answer, he plays the Haunted Creeper rather than the Knife Juggler so it doesn't get removed. Just really solid plays by both players.
Right. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I think most people wouldn't play the Whirling Zap-O-Matic early on because it just gets dealt with so easily with so many things. But because he has such a good hand and so many answers to any option that J-Shot chose to use, it works out quite well.
Yeah.
You know what? There's an option where you Abusive Sergeant the
Ooh.
Annoyatron here.
Right. That might have been actually a bit better. I think, yeah, that was a bit of an oversight by Jiesha. Obviously, something that's pretty hard to see. We have Monk here to be able to spot that for us, but pretty difficult to see that play. And I think it would have been a bit better to get those 1/1s out, especially because there's no Lightning Storm in this deck.
Right. So activating the Knife Juggler effect, in addition to getting more power on the field, I think it would have ended up a lot better, especially with our knowledge that the knives would hit the face.
Yeah, with our knowledge that that would happen. Looks like Surrender realizing he's never going to get, board control back after this first few turns. Going to start putting the pressure on, make it so it's really painful for J-Shot to tap from here on out. Even has that Crackle in hand to push some damage. What do you think he does here? Maybe plays the Totem Golem to get some pressure on the board and save the Crackle and the Lightning Bolt for later?
Right. So he's basically deciding right now if he wants to lightning bolt the knife juggler. Like, how much of a threat is it?
I don't think I think this Lightning Bolt is only going face in this game. I think he's wondering whether or not I think he's wondering whether or not right now he trades the 1/2 into the 2/1. Oh, okay, never mind. Just kidding. I'm completely wrong, I guess. So he's going for like half board control. It seems like here. That's gonna get kind of punished though by this Direwolf Alpha.
Right. But I think it's still okay because right now with this play, surrender guarantees that the Cogmaster gets on the field. Mm-hmm. And even though it's only 1 damage, with a mech it's possibly 3 damage. And that just means that you traded the lightning bolt for just a 3 damage on the field. So it's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah,
we see this we see this new cool observer feature here from our spectator mode. We get to show or hide the cards that are discovered.
So this is the spectator that we're watching. We're not watching J-Shaw's point of view.
Right. This is probably the spectator mode.
Well, actually, J-Shaw, it looks like the hand is on the card, so I think it actually.
Wow. Right.
Is J-Shaw's. In any case, J-Shaw goes for the obvious play. What he did picks up corruption though, which is kind of interesting.
I think it's kind of useless because if you corrupt something, then that just means your opponent will be able to get into attack with it.
Right. So Sunder, I mean, he's kind of competing with the board right now. I think I would have liked to save the lightning bolt for face earlier. Now that he hasn't drawn a mech, it's the power level of his board is kind of reduced a bit. But yeah, it looks like he's not valuing the 1 damage to face. Wants to get rid of that 1/1 so that it can't to reduce the amount of stuff that Jiesha can commit to the board. One thing to note here is that the Flame Imp is kind of dead in Jiesha's hand right here. In fact, he probably doesn't want to be tapping all that much from now on either.
Right, but again, this is a deck that is forced to tap. It's a very low curving deck, so he doesn't have like the big threats like Dr. Boom or Morganis to get him back on the field. He also, what I noticed is this deck doesn't even have Void Caller, so
Uh,
that's going to be hard as well.
right, right. So isn't able to get out the Doom Guards without discarding. It definitely makes sense. Doesn't have really the time in this deck. Wants to be very aggressive. Jiesha has the opportunity to use his Dark Peddler to kill the Totem Golem, but doing that involves either taking damage from the Flame Imp or not taunting two guys, which is obviously pretty painful. So yeah, he's just gonna go for clearing most, but not all of his opponent's board, and obviously gonna take the damage from the Leopard Gnome. Gonna corruption that Totem Golem though.
Yeah, the Defender of Argus was just a key draw. It's probably the best card in his deck against this type of deck. And yeah, now it's just up to Surrender to just put whatever on the field and hope that his opponent doesn't kill him in the next. I want to say he's on about a
Ooh.
4-turn clock. Wow.
Wow.
Perhaps even longer with this double Flame Imp draw.
Yeah, Surrender has a lot of time with that double Flame Imp draw. Obviously, he's a bit worried if he's going to be able to, get the requisite damage. And Jiesha, feeling the pressure, realizes that he needs more cards to be able to compete with this board. Goes
Right.
ahead and even taps there.
Let's see.
So far, it's
well,
pretty good actually, because you don't
Mortal
want these
Quill-
cards anyway.
Mortal Quill isn't that bad either, especially.
Yeah, but you can't use it now.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like this field just doesn't match up with Mortal Quill. Maybe the best draw would have been something like even Voodoo Doctor, honestly.
Yeah, Voodoo Doctor would have been pretty nice there. Gets rid of the Flame Imp. That's exactly what he wanted. Surrender sees that and says, "Really, really, the Flame Imp in your hand you get rid of." But we know that there's two, so it was likely that he was going to get rid of a bad card there. Let's see if Surrender picks up. Does get the double Crackle. So spell damage here will be the end of the game. And he might just wait on it, to be honest.
Well, actually, no, you might go for it because the worst case scenario is you leave him at 2, and that means he can't tap for the rest of the game.
Right. That makes sense. So Surrender looks like he's agonizing over this decision of whether or not to go for it. Kind of cool to finally see, other than our double Chinese match yesterday, to see both guys in the studio playing against each other. Builds up the suspense a lot to see both players kind of, agonizing over every decision in the situation.
Right. So there's only a 3 out of 16 chance that this Crackle doesn't kill him, and that's about a 19% chance.
Yeah, so I think you maybe just go for it, because it's only obviously a 1 in 4 of you getting spell damage every turn anyway. So yeah, I think you just do it. And like you said, you get your opponent to 2 anyway. But he's gonna not do it. Realizes he has a couple more turns to be able to, maybe get the spell damage. Does he have a Thalanos or anything like that in his deck?
No, but I think what he's hoping is that his opponent is just going to tap the next turn.
Right.
Or this turn and just get like 100% guaranteed lethal. And even if he doesn't, he can spell Power Totem.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing he gets really punished by is Lotheb.
Yeah, definitely. Is there Lotheb in the deck?
There's not Lotheb in this deck.
Yeah, I mean it runs pretty low. The highest costing things are the Doomguard. So it looks like Jiesha is going to push face mostly. He might attack this healing totem. Obviously, Jiesha saw Surrender take a long time and then pass, so he's probably pretty afraid of something like direct damage. And this is going to be Surrender's last chance in order to get that. Like you said, 3 and 16, they doesn't get it. Doesn't get the spell damage totem, so it's going to have to use these Crackles. The first one goes for 3.
Oh!
And now it's a 50-50 to see if he can get it. We've seen this so many times. 50-50 chance to see if he can get that lethal. And, I mean, he has to go for it. He's dead on board, I believe. But here we go. He's summoning up all the RNG favor that he can get right now. Here it comes. He looks... I don't know what that reaction
He looks pretty happy.
Okay.
He looks pretty happy.
All right. There we go. Gets the win there. Yeah, that was kind of an ambiguous reaction. I don't know. But in any case, he does go up 2-0. And Jiesha in a lot of trouble. Surrender only has to win with his, I believe it's a Tempo Mage, to be able to take this series 3-0. or take it overall in any case, depending if Jiesha comes back. Jiesha, by the way, has Shaman, Warlock, and Paladin remaining.
Right, so it's a tempo mage, so obviously it's going to be unfavored. But what we do see from the deck list is that it has two arcane blasts and two arcane missiles. So again, two cards that might help him with this matchup. Unfortunately, though, the deck that Jay Shaw is running is a very low curving zoo deck. So even though Surrender is getting the mirror entity probably from his deck, it still probably won't be very good because of all the low costing minions in Jay Shaw's deck.
Yeah, a lot of times when you're playing that tempo mage, you want the zoo to have a slower start so that you can set up your combos with those flame wakers and get a lot of that damage off to clear your opponent's board. But he's not going to be afforded that time in this game. Jiesha going to be having a fast start almost no matter what, and we do see that he has a pretty reasonable hand right now.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to have a like not a reasonable hand if you're running a deck like this. The nice part about this deck is consistency. You're always going to get something nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like the old zoo, the newer zoos with all the demon synergy and kind of curving out to the mid-range area, not as consistent, but just has so much more power in the end. This is kind of an old school type zoo, so it's going to be helping out in getting that nice curve. Jiesha, he has the opportunity to silence, but then that allows the mad scientist to trade into the knife juggler. So it looks like he's favoring his knife juggler quite a bit, especially because he doesn't really care about, you know, a mirror entity coming up potentially. I think if this abusive sergeant kills the mad scientist, then his opponent gets an abusive sergeant. Is that true? No, it's the other way. Okay, it only works with the SI7 agent and things like Goblin Blast Mage, I suppose. So.
Yeah, and also Cruel Taskmaster also procs it.
Right. Things that where the minion is the part of the battle cry is the minion is or part. Sorry, that doesn't make any sense. The battle minions with battle cry that set off the deaths of your opponent. That sets it up. But since it was in effect on the knife juggler, that wasn't the case. So Surrender really has had nothing to do there. Didn't want to play the the Mana Worm to just go to its death there from the Knife Juggler. And we see the power of this Dark Peddler, able to give you so many options. You know, has the ability to get that Flame Imp or the Soulfire, both of which are pretty good here. And let's see if we can get another knife on this Dark Peddler of his opponent. Doesn't really matter too much because the Void Walker can take it out. But
Yeah.
will still be nice nonetheless.
I just want to say pretty good positioning by Jay Shaw here. Obviously, a pretty experienced zoo player. He positions in a way that so that Direwolf Alpha will make his board the most effective.
Yeah, Direwolf Alpha obviously already in the hand there to help him out with those trades. The Defender of Argus is something else that can help, but you know, you just position according to what you have in your hand already.
Yeah. It just looks like Jay Shaw, in a typical Zoo versus Tempo Mage fashion, he's just running away with this game. And that's mostly because Surrender, he only got like one of the unfair things from Tempo Mage, which is getting Mad Scientist into Mirror Entity. And that wasn't even that good against this particular deck. He needed to really get some more unfair things like Mana Worm on turn 1 or Sorcerer's Apprentice into a lot of the 1-mana spells that are in his deck, like Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles.
Yeah, definitely that would be really helpful for him to kind of start clearing the board. Instead, it's Jay Shaw kind of running over him right now. Just so much damage coming out, and nothing for Surrender to do whatsoever. Just has his, you know, standard minions, nothing to combo with him at all. Looks like he's gonna go for a Hail Mary, Unstable Portal, gets no Zombro, which doesn't really do anything, and that's gonna be concede from Surrender. Jay Shaw brings it back. It is now 1-2 from his perspective, and we're going to see if he can complete the reverse sweep like we saw from Eloise earlier. We currently have the Shaman and Paladin remaining for Jay Shaw, and the Mage for Surrender. So what do you think about this matchup, or these matchups coming up potentially? The Tempo Mage versus the Aggressive Shaman, or the Tempo Mage versus the Secret Paladin?
Right. So as we mentioned before, it's kind of like Players are gonna go for the game wins and not just the match wins because game wins matter. So Jiesha will be queuing up with the best deck that he thinks matches up against this Tempo Mage. Obviously, that was Zoo in the first game, and I think it makes a lot of sense that he's going with Secret Paladin in the second game because, in my opinion, face decks really don't match up against decks that try to go for board control. And Tempo Mage, I want to say, is one of the decks that does go for board control, whereas Mech Shaman is more of a face deck. Secret Paladin is also not just a face deck. It's also a deck that really focuses on getting board control. So it's more of like a board control deck versus a board control deck. And I think this will be a pretty even matchup, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. These decks kind of, working their best to gain control of that board through their various, quote-unquote broken features. The Shaman, on the other hand, just crosses his fingers, tries to get something to stick, and hope that that minion can do a ton of damage to face. And that mana worm is pretty huge.
I already saw him mousing over the card that he drew, so I was like, oh, he drew mana worm on turn one, pretty good. And now, like, I think Surrender might run away with this game. The first key point was that he kept a Flame Waker in his opening hand, and that was because he had the coin. Flame Waker with the coin is like just so huge, so night and day. I hear a lot of people talking about this matchup, like Secret Paladin versus Tempo Mage, and like it's kind of like a 50-50 from the start. People like kind of facetiously say it's Casino Mage, but it's even more Casino Magey just in the opening hands, like if you get the coin or not, because that makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having that coin for, you get the extra mana and you get the 2 damage off can be huge. Gets what's that thing called again?
North Sea Kraken.
The North Sea Kraken, right?
Or as I like to call it, the Super Fire Elemental.
Yeah, 9/7 deals 4 damage to something. And, I mean, that's pretty useful at 6 mana. So, I mean, obviously he's not going to be able to get something in the near future, which is kind of what you want in this matchup that's dominated by early board control. But, yeah, not going to have that for a while. Going to have to use his Flame Waker to good use in order to gain back this board. Surrender right now contemplating whether or not he wants to attack into this. Obviously, there's the Noble Sacrifice consideration. And does go for it in the end. We see a Quartermaster come up for Jiesha, which is not going to be useful anytime soon, but does have the opportunity to play this Knife Juggler and allow for the event to potentially go off.
If you could get any card consistently with Unstable Portal, what would it be?
That's pretty tough. I think it might be the what's the 4/4 Shaman card that makes everything bigger?
Oh, Mistcaller?
Yeah, the Mistcaller, because that turns into, what, 3 mana minion, and you play that on turn 3, and suddenly the rest of your minions are amazing. For 6 mana, you just kind of lose tempo, but for 3 mana, it's absolutely ridiculous.
I like your way of thinking. I was going to say any 6 mana minion would be best because you can play it on turn 3. I was going to go with something more generic, like Emperor Thorzane or Sylvana Highmane, but yeah, I like your answer quite a bit.
Alright, so Surrender with his hands on his head with a tough decision here. A lot of things to think about. Obviously, he doesn't know what that secret is. He just knows that it's not Noble Sacrifice, and
it's not a competitive spirit,
and it's not the Repentance either. So,
right. So he kind of narrows it down to Avenge, which most likely it's going to be, and we know from our perspective it's going to be, or the Redemption.
Yeah, and they make a big difference here because if this Neutron gets redempted, it's pretty annoying, even at just 1 health. This is obviously annoying as well. You can get rid of it with the Frostbolt coin ping, but that's pretty expensive. Could also see him go for just playing the Sorcerer's Apprentice and Frostbolting that and leaving it for later, but again, those knives are pretty scary as well. Looks like that's what he is indeed going to go for, and just going to brave it next turn, it seems.
Yeah, you're at least the bright side of this is that you're not afraid of. Oh, Consecrate is pretty good. I was gonna say you're not too afraid of the Muster for Battle because you would have seen it on turn 3, but this Knife Trigger does survive now, and it's gonna be a little awkward for Surrender. I think one of the reasons he didn't decide to Frostbolt and Ping is that he really wants to save the coin because he has the option to combo the coin off with the Flame Waker. Or he can go for a turn 5 North Sea Kraken, which can kind of run away with the game.
Yeah, that is pretty powerful, turn 5 coin North Sea Kraken. Jiesha does go for the Consecrate here. Do you know if he runs 2 Consecrates or 1?
He runs 2 consecrates in this deck.
Okay, so that makes a bit more likely that he was going to use it there in the first place. Surrender has the opportunity to just kill this off with the Flame Waker coin, but then you just have ping after that, which is kind of unfortunate. Could go for the Piloted Shredder just to kind of contest the board, but obviously not the best trade after you've already used a Frostbolt. Pretty tough. Looks like he's kind of agonizing over the decision. The standard surrender pose where he thinks about what he's trying to do here. But yeah, pretty difficult all around whether or not to go for the Flameraker or the Shredder.
Surrender has quite a reputation in Korea for being the Korean life coach. He just people actually hate to play him in tournaments because he ropes so often and he thinks so much. But you know, it seems to be working out for him, so you can't really blame him.
Yeah, absolutely one of the top players, if not the top player in Korea. Obviously, I mean, I think Kranich is the only one who can kind of compete with him there. But looks like he is going to go for the Flamewaker coin, ping something, and it's going to clear off the Knife Juggler guaranteed, and he's just going to ping the face here. Jiesha can play this Shredder, but yeah, I mean, I guess he can turn his Divine Favor into an Arcane Intellect if he plays the Knife Juggler first, but that doesn't really compete with the Flamewaker very well, so I imagine we're probably going to see a Shredder here.
Yeah, a little unfortunate here that Divine Favor isn't really going to get much value. It's really a tech against control decks. Against aggro decks, it's usually you only draw for 1 at best, and that's if you make some really awkward plays as well.
Yeah, definitely. And Surrender kind of slightly playing around that. I don't know if that was part of his decision, but slightly plays around the Divine Favor with his play last turn. Looks like Surrender is kind of forced to use the Frostbolt here instead of going for a stronger minion like the Azure Drake or the Piloted Shredder. And we'll see where... Ooh, it's a leopard, or not a leopard, loot hoarder that pops out. So ends up being a good situation for Surrender. Doesn't have to waste any health on this Flamemaker. And now he's going to be on his Kraken turn.
Yeah, but what can you really crack in here? Most likely, I guess it would be Knife Juggler, Muster for Battle.
Yeah, Knife Juggler, Muster for Battle. Muster for Battle is a pretty good pickup here. It combos well with the rest of his hand, honestly, other than the Divine Favor. Wow, that's a... Is he going to get 3? Wow!
Oh, wow!
Oh my goodness. Okay. That's pretty painful.
And you know what? Not only that, but the Quartermaster will get insane value here. A card that is typically cut from Secret Paladin decks, but it seems to be situationally working for Jiesha here.
Yeah, it's going to be working really well. Surrender kind of laughing to himself, hoping it's not Repentance. He's going to get the good news that it's not. It's probably the second worst. Well, not the second worst, I guess. I was going to say it's pretty difficult. It's pretty annoying for his 9/7 to potentially run into a Noble Sacrifice. But yeah, we're almost certainly going to be seeing this Quartermaster here, probably with another 1/1. I assume the Repentance doesn't really do a whole lot. It just gets back a 1/1. So I think the only thing he's thinking about right now is whether to hit the face or to trade with this Kraken.
I think face is the place here. You have the Noble Sacrifice, so yeah, you might as well. Also, these trades are just really awkward. If you either have to run all 3 of these minions into the North Sea Kraken, or you have to hit it with your face, or hit the guy with your face anyway. I think this actually is going to turn into kind of a race because you see Dr. Boom, more likely than not will be the play on turn 7. But at the same time, Jiesha, he can't really deal with the Dr. Boom that well.
Wow, he's actually going to do this. The 9/1 will die to the Noble Sacrifice, but I kind of like just going face there.
Right, I like it too.
Because you put your opponent at 17 and you have, what, 14 damage on the field? 15 actually? So it's really, you know, a dicey situation for them. Looks like Surrender's not going to attack with the 9/1. Realizes what that secret is. Top deck Tyrion is absolutely huge, though.
Right. Well, now I guess he has to hit it with the face, and I think still, like, overall racing is pretty good here.
He doesn't really have to. What he can do is just run the 2/3/3s into the face, and then use his 2/5 in his face to clear off the 2/1/1s, and then play Tyrion. And then the Dr. Boom or the Kraken has to swing, and he's in a really good spot there, and he gets the 6 damage in.
Right. You do miss 2 damage that way, and I guess it's really nice to kill off the boom bots here and now, but oh, that's definitely a mistake, right?
Sorry, I
You
looked away for a
wanna
second. What did he do? He used his face?
he yeah, he used his face to kill off the boom bot before he attacked with any of his 3-3s. It
Wow.
worked out for him, but that could have
Yeah.
gone pretty badly.
Yeah, pretty unfortunate for Surrender that the Boombot did hit Jiesha's face there. Um, but yeah, gonna be really interesting. I'm actually gonna play the Tyrion first. Not worried about. Oh, he's actually gonna kill the 9-1. Okay. So wow, another Boombot to face. Doesn't want to see that whatsoever. And yeah, kind of a bit of a strange sequencing of plays there by Jiesha. Gets rewarded for it in the end because the Boombots hit his face. But really tough decision here. Tough situation here for Surrender. Picks up the Antonias, which can be reasonable. He can immediately activate that and start using the fireballs. But I mean, given the way that Jiesha has been, tiptoeing around Surrender's board, that might just, make Jiesha start hitting the face from that point, if you think about it.
Right? We still have to remember that there's a noble sacrifice on the field, so this Doctor Boom really isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, nothing at all. It's I mean, I imagine you still kind of swing with it because it's either I mean, you're just going to be tormented by this get down from here on out if you don't, but still going to be a really annoying situation.
Mad Scientist probably isn't going to do much, honestly. There's
Yeah,
so many minions that Jade Shot could draw that just proc the mirror entity anyway. And also, it just feels like the Mad Scientist, as strange as it sounds, is just too slow of a card. You do think that you're probably going to die in the next 2 turns, and Mad Scientist isn't really going to contribute to that,
yeah, absolutely.
to
Mad
preventing
Scientist is one of
any
the best
damage.
cards to get early, but obviously not late. Repentance is not too bad considering that it's kind of like a mirror entity, right? It discourages your opponent from playing anything big, and then now he gets to just play out his Divine Favor and potentially pick up something good. Gets a Mysterious Challenger. Obviously, can't play that now, but the Redemption. Wait, did he already play Redemption? He does already play Redemption. Okay, so you can play the Shredder, for instance, or maybe the Noitron just to protect his 3-3 and 2-4. But yeah, Jaysha, I mean, you can just go face here, right?
Yeah, I imagine so. I guess you can trade somewhat with the Mana Worm because it has the potential to get out of hand.
I guess you
And
I
trade
guess you
out.
die to Fireball Frost. Well, no, you don't because the Tyrion comes back. So it's really hard for you to die here with that Redemption on the board. You'd have to Surrender would have to kill something else and then kill the Tyrion and then have the requisite damage to kill Jayshaw.
Right.
So
He
it's
he could be he could be worried about Fireball. Yeah, that's exactly what he's worried about. And so he makes that trade. Fireball would be lethal with an Azure Drake on the field.
right. So all that said, Jayshaw's playing a bit safe, but he does still have a pretty massive lead. So kind of hard to blame him here. Surrender in a really tough spot. He needs to kill something else before he kills this Tyrion, unfortunately, which means likely going to see this Arcane Missiles if he's able to read that.
Yeah, so he's basically not playing around Flame Strike here. Flame Strike would just kind of wreck him, but from what we know of Surrender's deck list, there is no Flame Strike in the deck, so not really too many outs here.
Oh, kills the Tyrion by accident. Didn't want to see that happen. Now it's just going to come right back. And that's really horrible news for Surrender. Likely just has to ping and trade off his Dr. Boom. But no matter what he does here, it's just really a horrible situation for Surrender.
Right, trading after. So that would be. Yeah,
Just
that's
Yeah,
too
just
much damage.
concedes. So doesn't want to give away the remaining cards in his hand. Slash, he was basically dead anyway. And Jay is going to bring it all the way back to 2-2. This is the second time in a row that we've had a game or a series go from 0-2 to that 2-2. Last time Eloise pulled off the reverse all kill. We will see if Jay can do the same. However, this time he's playing with a Shaman, which is sometimes hard to pick up a win, as we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it's very common for these matches to go to 3-2. I think for like a threefold reason. First of all, it is Conquest, which means that oftentimes one deck will get stuck. Second of all, games do matter, so players are encouraged to bring their best decks to win every single game. So even if they're down 0-2, they're encouraged to bring their best deck against their opponent's remaining last deck. And third of all, we were talking to Firebat yesterday, and he mentioned that it's really smart in the Conquest format to target a specific deck. So in a lot of these matches, three decks are targeted against the last remaining deck of the opponent, and that's why it's often very hard to get that last deck out.
Yeah, all those absolutely contributing to the close scores here. Arcane Blast going to be pretty good for Surrender. Going to be able to play that for 0 mana with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, or combo it with the Flame Waker as well. So many things that he can do. Jiesha with a pretty decent hand as well. We will see if that Flame Wake or that Flame Tongue Totem, excuse me, comes into play here, and whether he can make use of that or if it gets clunky in his hands. But looks like he's going to start off with the good old-fashioned Mech Warper into Clockwork Gnome.
That's as good of a start as any. Not only that, but Flame Tongue Totem, a card that not a lot of people tend to bring in these decks, is an available start or an available card for him to play on the very next turn. And that's going to just do really well against the Tempo Mage generally.
Yeah, for Surrender's sake, I imagine he's just going to go for the Mad Scientist here. Everything else is a bit weak. I guess he could go for the Sorcerer's Apprentice plus the Arcane Blast or the Mana Worm and Arcane Blast onto the Clockwork Gnome to kind of contest the board a bit better. But the Mad Scientist is a 2/2 and it spawns, at worst a 1/2 the following turn. And then from there he can maybe make some fireworks happen with that Arcane Blast plus the other cards in his hand. So yeah, it does go for the Mad Scientist in the end.
Yeah, so from in one of the previous games, Surrender was playing Mech Mage and he was playing against Zoo. And based on that, based on his hand that he had in that game, he decided to go for face. Do you think it's more likely on this particular game that this Mech Shaman will go for face, or he'll try to go for board control instead?
It seems like a really aggressive deck, so I imagine he's going to go for face more often. The Secret Paladin, he did a lot of trading, but to be fair, that deck does rely on tempo a lot and kind of denying the options from your opponent. So I think we'll see Jiesha go at face a bit more. The question here is whether or not he's going to... oh, he's actually going to trade that way. He wants to keep his Mech Warper alive, and this way he's going to be able to clear off this Flame Tongue Tome right away.
Yeah, pretty nice play. Unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know how you want to look at it. This is really hard for Surrender to get rid of. Normally, a Flame Tongue Totem isn't very threatening because you can just kill it off with a weapon or a 3 damage spell, but unfortunately, that's not going to be the case here.
Yeah, Surrender offering up these guys for sacrifice right now. Not going to play the Arcane Blast. Going to save that for next turn with his Flame Waker. And... yeah, this is basically just sacrificial. He wants to get something on the board so he doesn't take, continuous damage to face. In his mind, hopefully one of these survives, and we can see that that is going to be the case. One of these minions is going to survive to allow him to kind of make some fireworks happen next turn.
Yeah, and just judging from this hand, this is actually going to be really good for Surrender because just Jiesha doesn't have a lot of minions to play or any spells to play. If a Rockbiter were in Jiesha's hand or a Lightning Bolt, it would be pretty disastrous for Surrender, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry,
yeah, I would with the obvious trades here. Then the Sorcerer's Apprentice survives, and then Surrender can go for Flame Walker plus the Arcane Blast on the next turn.
Yeah, definitely. And that is actually pretty huge. That that healing totem. Just because sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, not as good as Taunt, I think.
Well, the big thing is that Surrender wants to get rid of this Mech Warper because there's potential for a Fel Reaver that we see in the hand of Jiesha. And Surrender's a really smart player, so I imagine that's something that's in his mind, excuse me, that the Fel Reaver could be coming out here. And so, yeah, we will see what he decides to go for. I think he's going to trade into the, he's going to trade into the Flame Tongue Totem first, and then probably go with the Arcane Blast. He might actually kill the Totem. No, okay, he's going to go for the guaranteed kill, and that's going to allow room for this Fel Reaver to come up, which is going to be pretty unfortunate for Surrender.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tempo Mage is not one of those decks that runs BGH. It's a tempo deck, which means it relies on the tempo to kind of deal with the the Fel Reaver. It relies on having a really dominant board. Going to the turn of Fel Reaver, or it relies on the Fireball, which oftentimes is enough, but unfortunately, no Fireball here for Surrender, and he's kind of like used up all his resources just trying to get board control, struggling for board control early on. And he's done so quite inefficiently as well. We saw this first Mana Worm from Surrender just getting killed off by a lowly Mech Warper.
Yeah, for free essentially because of that healing totem. So we do see the arcane missiles, and I believe it's going to be used here. So I'm wondering whether or not he should kill this this totem first. But I think you don't kill it, just to have more things to hit. But I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah, it's just gonna do that to. I mean, the milling of the opponent doesn't really matter too much, but yeah, I imagine it's going to be a ping onto. Oh, actually, he's able to kill it. That's actually pretty huge.
Yeah, that worked out pretty well. Yeah, unfortunately, it just seems like Jiesha has card advantage now.
Yeah, somehow with this certain with his aggressive shaman.
Yeah, and not only that, but he has ancestral knowledge as well, so that card advantage will compound even more.
Wow, so
Oh,
yeah,
so
really good turn
unlucky.
for Lothab. Jayshaw with the perfect turn to play Lothab there, locking out that arcane intellect. And yeah, Surrender just has to ping and pass, and that's really painful because I mean he might have wanted to, he might actually want to play the Antonidas just vanilla on the board next turn, and that's not really going to be too much of an option, or I mean it will be less good of an option without other cards to back it up. Jaysha with the ability obviously to play, you know, both minions in hand right now. Could also go for a Lava Burst, but I imagine he's just probably going to kill the Flamemaker with his Lothar. It's just a really good trade right now.
Yeah,
And
not only that, but he plays a lot of minions that have comparable health amounts. So now Surrender, if he had something like an Arcane Blast, he would have to decide: is this Lothab more threatening, or is the Whirling Zap-O-Matic more threatening here?
I think maybe the Whirling Zapomatic more threatening just because of the 6 damage every turn and maybe even more of that, strangely enough. But yeah, gonna go for the Arcane Intellect, and that's partially because of the Flame Cannon that he picked up. He can use this to maybe clear something up. Grom is a pretty good pickup, can use it pretty defensively, for 5 mana even better too. So there's hope for Surrender yet. Gets the Flame Cannon on the worst minion, because there's no mechs in hand to make cheaper anyway. I would be pretty surprised if Jiesha doesn't just Doomhammer here. That's a lot of damage he'd be throwing away if he just totemed.
Mm.
Yeah, so it looks like he's finally going to go for that Doomhammer, the Golden Doomhammer nonetheless.
Yeah, funnily enough, the Whirling Blades is actually pretty good as well here. If he had like an additional mana, it would be 2 extra damage, and if he didn't have this Doomhammer, that would have been a pretty good choice as well. Oh wow, really good draw for a Surrender here, and it just might be that he could potentially back this game.
Yeah, there's so much damage for Jiesha though. It's just, I mean, and this Annoyatron is actually really good because it's going to be really annoying to get past it. We have at a minimum 8 damage from the hand of Jiesha. At a maximum, it's 11. And going for, I mean, he has 12 damage left on this Doomhammer as well. So Surrender on a pretty quick clock, and he's going to have to kill his opponent before then. Don't think there's many taunts in Surrender's deck, so looking really poor for him.
Right, in Tempo Mage, there's typically no taunts in the deck, so I wouldn't blame him if he just Earthshocked this Grom here.
Right.
Although, you know, are always unstable portal shenanigans, and that 10 attack Grom actually isn't doing much with the Neurotron.
Yeah, definitely. So he can, yeah, maybe he can use the Earthshock for some unknown minion later. And
Yeah,
with the
it would
Whirling
either
Blades, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it would either have to be something off the Piloted Shredder or something off Unstable Portal.
Yeah. So with the Whirling Blades and the Lava Burst and the Crackle, I think Jiesha just wins this next turn.
I think so as well. I think just from those cards, even if the board is fully cleared, there's really not too much of an option. The only way for Surrender to actually save himself would be some crazy unstable portal, or if you got a Frostbolt to the face, for example.
Yeah, so this is going to be guaranteed lethal here. Not even with the Whirling Blades. Yeah, minimum 8 damage. Gonna go for the totem anyway.
Oh,
And
you have to go for the spell power crackle for BM.
Even just rolls the 3. And Jiesha is going to take it, going to do the reversed all kill. And that's the second time we've seen it today, surprisingly enough. He is going to take that series 3 games to 2. Eloise so far and Jiesha are our players with wins, Surrender, and Fuelver with losses. So those are our standings, so to speak.